Bonjour tout le monde. Let's say a country like France wants to move from a bureaucratic educational system to one that is based on professional learning and the role of the teacher and role of the leaders at the school level to make changes by developing some of them together and to develop a collaborative culture. Let's say that that's the proposition. And that's what I'm going to talk about. And first, to note, it's a very big change. If the culture is bureaucratized, if it's been like that for decades or more, then you have a major change in reculturing. And some of the ideas about this I'm going to draw from England, our study there, as well as our development of this very proposition in Ontario, Canada. And it is a change in culture. So let's recognize that this is a very major fundamental change. It's a change in policies, yes, policies that will be directed to supporting this, but mainly it's a change in capacity building. That is the actual work. We'll call it pedagogy. So it's not just the policies. That's easy to focus on those. So what I'm going to tell you from the lessons from the two countries, from England and from Ontario, the province, is something about those changes that are especially tied into culture, reculturing, and that then lead towards more policy changes and their impact. So let's take a look at what we learned from England and how we built upon it in Ontario, Canada. We're going to look at professional learning in large systems. And an important thing to note in terms of how at least England and Ontario went about it is they didn't do the general policies first. That is, every teacher should learn all the time. There's going to be a certain number of days of professional development. They didn't do the formal policies at the beginning. What they did was to tie it in to particular content. In both cases, improving literacy and numeracy. In Ontario, improving secondary school education. So we have here then the way to get at learning and the change of culture, I'm going to say, is best served in many ways by some content and the content of doing the work of improvement. And then you surround it with policies to reinforce that. So that's the story I'm going to tell you in this next minutes. When we go to England, we were in 1997, the beginning of Tony Blair's first term as Prime Minister. And he decided, and his policy advisors, that they were going to focus on education. He said, education, education, education. Those are his priorities. He said, we're going to use the knowledge about change to bring about improvements in literacy and numeracy across all of primary schools in England, 22,000. Not United Kingdom, but England itself, that system with its 170 districts or however many local authorities they have. And so we were commissioned to evaluate it, our team in Toronto, Canada. And we spent those first 4 or 5 years, 97 to 2001, assessing what was happening. They put together a literacy numeracy secretariat. They had leaders to help lead schools in what the pedagogical changes were, linked to assessment and improvement. They set targets, and they put a major effort into that kind of improvement. So I'm going to jump to the end of our evaluation, which was 2002, and we drew 4 lessons. 2 of them are positive, that is, do these things and you'll get good results, and 2 of them are don't do because they undercut change. And so here we want to reinforce, starting with the do. It is important to focus on a small number of key priorities and to stay the course, to stay at those focused priorities. Very important to do that. A lot of people have had too many priorities, or they jumped around and changed every 2 years. But initial focus, stay with it, get better at it. So that focus on the small number of priorities, very important lesson. The second really crucial lesson is widespread capacity building. Capacity building is when you invest in helping people get better at something. In this case, it's better at the teaching of literacy and numeracy, so pedagogy. It's better at leadership that would cause that to happen. It's better at using data to show and assess that you're making progress. All of those things captured in the English strategy were what helped them get success. And they did get success. That is, literacy and numeracy did go up significantly. From they started with a certain amount of level, 54%, 60% of their national test, and they moved up to 80%. So we know they got success for those initial few years. But there were two things that we noticed that were undercutting the motivation for change. They were losing ground, if you like, by the time we got to 2002. And the two things that were most problematic were what we ended up calling punitive accountability. That is, they assessed the progress of every district, of every school for that matter. And if the results annually were not strong in a given case, they would result in feedback and then in intervention, which they call special measures. Special measures from the outside to make the school or the district, the local authority, better. And they also obsessed on targets. They set these targets, and the targets were by district, by school. So this bureaucratic formulation, which is what I'm talking about under the don'ts, was such that it undercut the motivation of teachers and principals to keep going. So we're not dwelling on England right now. The future after 2002, I'm leaving out. I'm just looking at what we learned, but because they were one of the first, probably the first big system that really deliberately tried to bring about large-scale change, changing the quality of teachers and leaders in terms of capacity. So now let's jump to Ontario. It just happened, by good coincidence, that as we were finishing our evaluation in 2002, there was an election in Ontario. In Canada, there's no federal agency, no national agency in education. Each province has its own autonomy. And a new government came in, a Liberal government headed by a premier whose name is Dalton McGuinty. And he appointed me as his chief advisor, largely in some ways, I'm told, because we had just studied England and we pulled out the lessons there. So we took these lessons, if you put it one way, we took the two do's and built it into Ontario, and we avoided the two don'ts in moving forward. So here we then start in 2002. It actually was October 2003 when the election occurred. And so the end of that year, the beginning of 2004. Here's Ontario. It's one of 10 provinces, more or less in the middle, not quite, but it's on the eastern side of the middle. And now close to 15 million population. So they're organized into 72 local districts. You see the number of schools, 4,000 at the primary level, 900. The proposition was to improve literacy and numeracy in those 4,000 schools. That the same as England's focus at that. But we also added 2 years into the development how to improve the secondary schools and the 900 of those. So that's what I'm going to look at. I won't dwell on the strategies. I want to share these with you so you can we can discuss it when we debrief on this. But it's our version of learning from England and customizing it to Ontario. The small number of ambitious goals, the capacity both for school leaders and district leaders, but also for teachers, the use of data, intervening in a non-punitive manner. This way we did not make big judgments. We had transparency. We built capacity building. We had strategic action. Like England, we created a literacy numeracy secretariat at the central level that enabled this to happen. And we invested in capacity building to do that. But unlike England, we did not have this, if you like, heavy-handed assessment. So that's our strategy. You could read in some of the publications we have the full case story. I want then to jump to the results, if you like. There's an assessment agency in Ontario called the Ontario EQAO, Education Quality and Assessment Office. And this is an arm's length agency from the government. Its job is to assess in year 3, that's 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, year 6, 11, 12-year-olds, and year 9, literacy, literacy in terms of writing and reading, mathematics, and in the case of secondary school graduation. these are the results, and we always disaggregate it. This is an important point. We have the average. You can look at the average here, the black diamond that's going across, and so we do that. But because we have raised the bar, closed the gap, equity goals, we disaggregate the data to examine that. So we actually had, formally speaking, a few goals. One goal as a cluster: improve the learning of literacy, numeracy, secondary school graduation. So that was one goal. The second goal was raise the bar and close the gap, the equity goal, around those three measures. And the third goal we expressed as to increase the public's confidence in the public education system. So I won't examine this in great detail, but you can see on the average we moved from 46% all the way up to 76, 77%. These are EQAO measures. They're actually stronger than PISA, so that even they would be higher on the PISA standard than you see here. But that's a trajectory I want to know. I want to emphasize. And then you see that when we compared boys and girls did better. We had strategies to help boys get increased. Then again, I won't take all the details, but you have English as a second language. We have an enormous number of immigrants that come into Canada, most of them settled in Ontario. And so our strategy is such: how do we incorporate these English language learners in terms of where their starting points are quite low, as you see that green triangle at the bottom, 24%, and then to see it go all the way up to 73%. Didn't close the gap, but reduced it considerably. So I'm emphasizing now the results, if you like, of our efforts based on the strategies you saw a couple of slides ago. For high school graduation rates, these are, you see that we started at 68%. Remember, 900 schools. We had strategies. I'm going to name one of those strategies in a moment. And they resulted in this steady, really, because we were investing in capacity building, because professional learning grounded in the work of the high school, the secondary school was part of this capacity building. It led to steady increases of 2 or 3% a year, and it's still going up at 86%. You want to see it go, 95%, I will say. And so this is encouraging. If you think of it in another way, we had 190,000 additional graduates that I'm going to say we would not have had we not had this strategy. And so that this is very encouraging to be able to develop it. One other emphasis I want to make: this requires more knowledge and detail than I have time to explain. But one of the innovations we put in place in the secondary schools, the 900, was called the Specialist High Schools Major, so SHSM. And these were programs that were focused on agriculture. You'll see the list on that fourth bullet there. And the schools, depending on the community, could develop 1 or 2 or 3 of these programs. And it led to eventually 46,000 students participating in these programs, and they would spend half day in the academic learning and half day in the placement in the local community or business or setting. So practically speaking, we gave the relevance and the meaning of this. This is a detail you should have to know, but it's really a result of the focus about the professional learning of teachers to develop in these ways. So more ideas about surrounding it. We developed in the course of doing this what we call the coherence framework, a small number of things, but powerful and complete, I'm going to say, that covered most things. And the coherence framework, my colleague Joanne Quinn and I wrote a book on this called Coherence. It is available in French, published in Quebec, and the book is looking at these 4 things, and these are the strategies operationally, if you like: the focus, literacy, numeracy, high school graduation; collaborative cultures for capacity building; and then the quality of pedagogy. I'm going to mention this in a few moments. I'm also going to turn to accountability. It's important to know what lies behind these things, and the meaning of coherence is just not a word. But the meaning of it is it's really about the shared depth of understanding about the quality of the work, the nature of the work. And that shared depth of understanding is it's not just alignment. It's just not being individuals talking about it. It's when we go into a school and we ask 3 or 4 teachers, what's your strategy, what's your focus? And without checking with each other, they give us the consistency, the specificity of that. We know, and we use a phrase, that they know how to talk the walk, and that's what they do. And we know that it's in place, but we also have measures of doing that. So just a few more things to reinforce that this is really about knowledge and capacity building. It's about a group developing these in detail. We have this is maximizing change, 3 big qualities that we want to see happening. We want to see principals, school principals. We want to see teacher leaders, people at the district level. We have 72 districts, as you will recall. We want to see them leading learning. That is to be learners and have good ideas, but also to learn from teachers and from others. We want to see them to know how to bring about change. And also system player, not really a word in English, I don't think even, but a system player is someone who is doing their work in their own classroom, but is aware of they're part of the school. So they contribute to the school. They're aware that that's part of a set of schools. And if you go to the whole system, you need to have, in our case, we had to have 5,000 schools working on this. We had to have clusters of schools in districts, the local districts, the 72 of them inside the district. We had districts learning from each other. We had ongoing action between the Literacy and Numeracy Secretariat at the government level, the Ministry of Education, and the schools building capacity. So this covers a lot of ground. It's focused. It's highly, I guess I'll say, really zeroing in on a small number of things that make a difference. But I want to just, as I complete this, talk about some of the sub parts, just so that you'll know, again, that I'm not talking just about general strategy. Here's a piece of work from Vivian Robinson that looks at what does a school principal do? Research this was around the world. What do school principals do to get results working with their teachers? And she calculated these effect sizes. An effect size is a statistical measurement that shows the strength of the factor, in this case, in terms of contributing to student achievement. And the guideline for this that the researchers offer is that 0.40 and above is worth looking at. 0.40 and below it can be statistically significant, but not very exciting, not very powerful. So you'll see 4 of these 5, to make a longer story short. 4 of them are quite low, 0.42, 0.31, 0.27, establishing goals, getting resources, quality teaching, meaning the individual teacher. There's only one that stands out as very powerful, the 0.84, and that is leading, teaching, learning, and development. This is the role of the school leader. And the way to put it is the most powerful impact is when the leader, the school principal, participates as a learner with teachers in moving the school forward, in this case on literacy, numeracy, high school graduation. This is a big change from a bureaucratic system where you would have a manager of the school running the school to a collaborative culture where the leader, the principal, actually is one of the lead learners and participates in that. So we know from that research that this is powerful. We have further confirmation of this as we push ahead in collaboration. There are 2 or 3 words or concepts that people use. They're all, I think, very similar. Collaborative professionalism, Andy Hargraves does that. Collective efficacy, same concept, different word. Our own connected autonomy is like this, but let's think of collective teacher efficacy. And here from John Hattie, Visible Learning, we have his results, and these kind of, I guess I'll say, would almost blow you off the screen, because now when he measured collective efficacy in relation to impact on learning, and we're going to look at the 4 pieces of collective efficacy, he talked about, he found that the effect size was 1.57. Remember in the other chart, Vivian Robinson, it only went as high as 0.84. This is like almost double that. This is incredibly powerful. So what is this collective efficacy? John Hattie, this is entirely compatible with our research and our theories. He said 4 things come together in these schools that have big impact, big collective efficacy results. One is that the staff, the teachers, and the principal have a shared belief that they can actually be successful with these students. The second is the reason they believe this is they look a lot at the evidence that they have, plus what the research tells them. Thirdly, they have a culture of collaboration to identify and implement what they call high yield strategies. This is pedagogy that gets big results, high yield, specific. And finally, in another big confirmation, leaders participate in frequent specific collaboration. This is none other than our participates as a learner with teachers in making the school powerful. This stuff is pretty consistent. It's hard to do. We did it on a big scale, and you have to stay at it to do it, but you have to be focused to be able to do it. This is the essence or the nature of the content of the change in culture that I was talking about at the beginning. A very fundamental change, a very difficult change to go from a culture of bureaucracy to a culture of efficacy. And to further reinforce this, I want to just take you to this. This PPM, which stands for Policy Program Memorandum, is an official document coming from the government that connotes certain areas of focus. And I was part of this with the teachers' unions. There's 4 or 5 unions. So with the government, representatives from the schools and the school boards, myself as advisor, the teacher unions, got together and spent a year, and this memorandum is about 3 pages long. And we said we endorse collaborative professionalism, and we want to highlight that in official policy. This is not legal policy, but it's the operational policy of the Ministry of Education. And look at what it says. No fooling around. In Ontario, this is written and signed off by unions, as well as by the professionals, as well as by the government. Collaborative professionalism is defined as all levels of the system, working together, sharing knowledge and skills, improve student achievement, and the well-being of both students and staff. So this is I'm going to say, a very powerful reinforcement of this development. And then finally, and if I had more time, I would say a lot about accountability. This is the really hard one to get right. Richard Elmore from Harvard, a couple of 10 years ago, said it best, I think. He said, you have to distinguish between internal accountability within the school or the district and external accountability, which is the government results. And he said the most important one is internal. That is the degree to which the internal accountability takes the collective responsibility, develops it. And there's certain things that have to be part of this. They have to be specific. Are we moving ahead in literacy? What is the pedagogy? Show us. Be careful. Transparency. What actually is the other results? And it has to be surrounded by non-judgmentalism. If we go back to England, had we used judgments around the results, very strong feedback and consequences for schools, we would have demotivated, I'm going to say, the momentum. And because it's out in the open, we still see the results. And accountability externally still plays a role. You saw the charts I used, but it has a role of monitoring and some degrees of intervention. But mainly, the whole emphasis is on development, success, and transparency, and being able to understand those. When people, teachers, for example, when they see success, when they experience the capacity, when they get good at it, they want to do more of it. It's the group that puts pressure on themselves to do more of it. And that's when you know you have success, because the emphasis has shifted from the policy, the government trying to cause something to happen, to the system itself wanting this to happen. And it's that part that is the very strongest legacy of this kind of change. So I hope this has been helpful for you to think about this. We certainly have those 2 cultures to think about. There's much more to talk about. I'd be glad to talk in the Q&A and any kind of follow-up. But this is, to finalize my point, a very big change in culture. It does require these kinds of details of doing the work better. And then you can surround it with policies that provide more professional development for leaders, criteria for appointment. But it's not the bureaucratic criteria that carry the day. It's the actual capacity building. So thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to any follow-up discussion that you will have.